I wanted to talk to you this afternoon about some of the more recent Gypsy and Traveller encampment sites that have occurred throughout the district, but specifically in Newark. Now, I have seen social media and I've seen the questions that are being asked there. Among them, what are the council doing about this? Why are these groups allowed to stay for over a week? And why is the council incompetent in dealing with this? Now, I could put things out in writing, but it's more easy to speak to you in this manner. And I want to try and answer some of those questions as best I can on what is quite a complicated situation. So in the first instance, I want to say sorry, and you'll hear me say it again later, for the frustration that is abound, for the difficulties we're encountering, and for the fact that we aren't able to deal with this in the manner we might prefer. But there are some key issues I have to cover off in the first instance. The first of which, as most people will know, in Newark and the surrounding areas, we have long-standing Gypsy and Traveller communities resident here. And I don't want them being tarred with the same brush as some of the recent difficulties we've had. There's something important to me about community cohesion, identifying there are differences between some people, and indeed some people that choose to briefly visit the district. We don't have difficulties with either, but some, as we have more recently, are recurrent. Tackling that issue of incompetence head on, if I may, we're not, but I can empathise why people might think it looks that way. As I say, I'm a resident in Newark, I live here as well, I share the frustrations. So I thought it might help just to talk through the process we have to undertake when people arrive in our district. And I'll use the most recent example, which has been the arrival at Cleveland Square, which has subsequently moved on to another site, and more recently onto another site again. Right. Now, in the first instance, when people arrive in our district, under the law, we have to undertake what they call a welfare check. And that is to go down to the site and assess if anybody has illnesses, if they have children, special needs, immediate requirements that they might have. This derives from human rights legislation and others, and it's something we simply have to do. We were there within 3 hours when most recently people arrived at Cleveland Square. This is something we've learned to expedite as quickly as we possibly can, both in their interests and also our own. Because until that has been undertaken, nothing further can occur. Now, thereafter, we would have a conversation with the individuals and ask how long are they intending to stay. Is there something we can do? And we immediately hand out bin bags and others to try and minimise any mess and detritus that might occur, because of course there aren't facilities on these sites for them. Thereafter, having undertaken that welfare check, we seek to expedite an eviction order. Difficulty number 1, whose land? If it's district council land or county council, town council, that's somewhat more easy. If it's private land, I'm unable to do that for those private landowners. Strictly speaking, one shouldn't advise. So there's a first act there of identifying who owns the land and what can we do to mitigate this issue. So in this instance, welfare check was undertaken. We resolved to gain an eviction order from the court because it was our land. On Saturday the 19th of June, we served notice to the group, that's very soon after they arrived, advising them of our intent to seek possession of our land and request that they vacate by the Monday immediately following. There's a niggling reality. Courts are closed at the weekend. On Monday, that's Monday the 20th, we met with the police and to discuss all the legal options available. We issued instructions to our lawyer and requested a court date at the earliest opportunity that we could in order to expedite that eviction. We're as bound by court availability as others are, and we could take no further action until that has occurred. There is a distinction here between civil law and criminal law. The court date was set for the afternoon of Friday the 25th of June. The hearing went in our favour, and we served the eviction notice that very afternoon to vacate. Now, we then attended the site with the police and bailiffs, necessarily because those travellers hadn't recognised the order that had been put upon them. Once they departed, of course, our street scene team immediately cleared the area of all detritus and difficulty so that the land could be enjoyed again by residents for play and recreation. Now, throughout all of that, in the requirements of the law, and I'm not defending the law incidentally, but it is a process that is required of us, we acted as quickly as possible in every possible manner that we could. Now, what frustrates me even more is just this one example. If I can't even include the time of officers cleaning up afterwards and getting various things prepared, the cost of that eviction was around about £7,000, and that's just a one-off example. And I can hear people probably shouting into the camera, this has happened before. Why does it keep happening? Well, as I'm seeking to explain, because there are legal parameters we must observe and must respect. Most frustratingly for me, as the law stands, that eviction notice is applicable solely to that site, in this case Cleveland Square. And because it's civil, not criminal, whilst the police, the bailiffs and our own colleagues might be in attendance and might be in other locations, we cannot physically impede or prevent relocation on another site. And that is the greatest frustration that I'm seeing in these social media comments, and it is one I 100% share. So, up they went to the top of the hill. Not particularly pleasing to us, Newbury Road. They had looked into other areas, and there's something to learn from that. They went to Collis Close, but there were barriers there they could not get through, and they did look at a couple of other areas. But Newbury Road, as I say, and indeed I went to visit them myself to try and have some conversations with them. The process has to start again. A further welfare check, the relevant eviction orders and notices, and they've been served. And as I'm speaking, my understanding is they have moved off, and sadly, I believe, have moved to Thorpe Oaks in Coddington. Something everybody would say they could predict, and I'm not excluded from that, but something none of us can actually within the law prevent. It's not good enough. This is happening every year. This is something that frustrates residents, and I do want to re-emphasise, because some feel there's an undertone of racial prejudice in this. There simply isn't. When people are choosing to locate onto land that is there for people's play or their recreation, where detritus is occurring, where people aren't using the necessary litter facilities we've provided, this is an impact upon every single resident who similarly should enjoy freedom of access to these sites and to use them as they wish, and who pay for their waste disposal and other matters, and probably suspect if this occurred, I'd be down there with a fine book having a conversation with them. So, things have got to change, as I've said. We've learned in the past on this, and I want to apply that learning more. So what won't have been perceived on this occasion is some of the sites where we've had the most visits in recent years. We've sort of target hardened, if I can call it that. Cedar Avenue would be one example, where with semi-mature trees, some fairly sizable boulders, and again an access gate with a padlock, we know that it was a deterrent because people sought to visit it on this occasion. At the leisure centre, people might recall 2 or 3 occasions that car park has been used, and albeit there were examples of criminal damage, you drive down there now, you'll see the yellow height barriers, because there we can try and prevent vehicles of different heights getting in, but not all. Now, I want to use this learning on as many sites as possible, but there is a reality that I have to struggle with and share with you. If I use Cleveland Square as an example, it's a massive expanse of open space, and should we prohibit access to it for everybody? We might be able to, with knee rail fencing, with bollards and with some planting. And again, if that gets damaged, we might be able to evidence criminal damage, which means there are different ways of looking into this. So I want to iterate that undertaking, that as best we can, in sites where we can reasonably do this and it doesn't ruin the enjoyment of residents of those sites, we will seek to make them more difficult to get onto, whilst understanding we ourselves need to get on to mow the grass and to look after the various different facilities. Secondly, I myself have submitted a response to a Home Office consultation on the issue of illegal encampments. And I'll emphasise again, these are encampments outside the law and provision. And I'm seeking to ensure that those laws support all people involved, the police, ourselves, and bailiffs, and the courts, importantly, to try and expedite this a little more speedily if we can. But I'm going to ramp up that response to them as best I can. Thirdly, and I think this is increasingly important, forms of protocols and agreements between ourselves, other councils, which has been improving, so it's not just us on this occasion, it's been happening in Worksop, it's been happening in Ashfield, it happens in most areas with the A1 or the A46 going through it. We're proud of ourselves for having good transport links. There are downsides to this as well in this regard. I'll work with them, the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Chief Constable and others to see again if there's more we can do in this respect to try and target harden and to respond as speedily as possible. But I would commend them for the work they've done with us so far. And then fourthly, and I have seen some points raised on this, we will shortly be undertaking on the final round of consultation for Gypsy and Traveller site provision in Newark and Sherwood district, and I will anticipate there will be a need for further sites in Newark. In itself, that is not panacea. That is consultation on the sites required for, if I can say, sort of resident gypsy and traveller population. So our own data on people that live here who may need the extra sites going forward. It's something we do in the same way that housing provision is forecast by the government. So I'd be looking for permanent sites, but similarly we'll try and investigate if we can have sort of a drop-off site or a stop site where people might want to choose to go instead of the parks and open spaces. And I can hear people already talking of the cost. The permanent sites is a cost we'll need to discuss with the government because it is a national requirement upon us. The temporary sites, yeah, there's going to be a cost, but as you heard me pick up earlier, there is the court cost, the clear-up cost, the site development cost of everything that occurs each year. And if this does continue each year as it is on 4 or 5 sites, apply the multiplier, not necessarily saying it will save money, but it wouldn't cost an arm and a leg to the same extent that it might if it was just a standalone requirement. So those 4th undertakings I'm giving now. But I do want to emphasise again, whilst I empathise and can see that there is a perception, why didn't you go and park across the entrance? Why didn't you do this? You must have known where they're going. Totally agree, totally share that frustration. The law does not permit the level of activity I think we'd all prefer to see be undertaken. I hope, therefore, that I've sought to explain the situation to you, and as I promised right at the beginning, my apologies again. I wish that we could do more, I wish it could be speedier, I wish it could be more certain, and I wish we could promote the proper community cohesion that we want. I'll look into those undertakings I've given, we'll keep working on this, but I will not give false promises, as well you know. Thank you for your time.